There's an old saying that goes, scratch a liberal and a fascist bleeds. This phrase comes from the recognition that liberals are actually conservative right wingers. Even though Fox News regularly calls Joe Biden a radical leftist, and your uncle at Thanksgiving dinner usually calls anybody who votes for a Democrat a Marxist, and even the New York Times will consider ideas like universal health care to be radical leftist ideas. There's a lot of very important differences between a leftist and a liberal, though. And these differences explain why the Democratic Party is so hostile towards progressive policies that are overwhelmingly popular among their base of support. Here's the best way that I have found to think about the political spectrum. The right wing defends the existing hierarchies and the traditions that maintain them, while the left opposes hierarchies and the related traditions. It's not about big government versus small government or tradition versus progress in some abstract sense. It's about whether you think that the current arrangement of power is natural and legitimate or inherently oppressive. This is why right wing populists will tend to get along very well with right wing billionaires, even though they have very different material interests. The populist wants to preserve social and cultural hierarchies because it gives them some semblance of power, while the billionaires want to preserve the economic hierarchies to protect their own money and the power that that money allows them to hold over other human beings. They are defending different hierarchies, but they're speaking the same language. Liberals are speaking the same language too. They might not defend hierarchies in the way that the hard right does. They will acknowledge that there are some problems with the system, but they don't want to make any radical changes. They just want to make some small compromises that make the suffering a little bit harder to notice. In practice, this makes liberalism a buffer for fascism. When people get angry enough to actually change the system, liberals step in with just enough change to turn the temperature down and keep the system intact. This is why liberals are actually conservative, if you think about it. This is because the entire philosophy of liberalism is built on assumptions about capitalism being the natural order of the world. Leftists, on the other hand, reject capitalism because it is defined by hierarchies like workers and owners and landlords and tenants. The entire system runs on the extraction of wealth from the people who do the work by the people who own the tools, the land, and the capital. A leftist names this as a hierarchy and opposes this, while a liberal calls it the free market and protects it, along with their more conservative partners. This distinction gets even clearer when you look at foreign policy, which is where liberalism's comfort with hierarchy becomes impossible to ignore. The entire history of American foreign intervention has been a bipartisan project. Both major political parties have overseen war crimes during the brutal military operations that they have carried out. These wars are waged for the sake of U.S. hegemony, which is essentially a hierarchical belief that the United States has the right to impose its will on other nations, extract resources, install friendly governments, and punish anyone who tries to build an independent economy. Liberalism does not have a problem with any of this, as long as certain procedural norms are followed. If there's some kind of humanitarian cover story, liberals will support wars that leftists will recognize as imperial aggression. Domestically, it works the same way with labor. The American labor movement was built by socialists, anarchists, and communists who organized at the risk of being beaten, imprisoned, or killed. These were actual leftists, and they are responsible for any semblance of workers' rights that we have today. At the time, all of the organizing that these radicals were doing were opposed by the liberal establishment, or at the very least, ignored. What liberals did throughout history was absorb just enough of the left's demands to diffuse the movement. Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal is a classic example of this. After the Great Depression, people were ready for revolution. Millions of people were radicalized, and there were massive general strikes, factory occupations, and growing membership in socialist and communist parties. Roosevelt wasn't a leftist. He was actually a liberal who understood that if you did not give working people some relief, they might actually overthrow the system. He said this himself. The New Deal was about saving capitalism, not replacing it. The liberals will adopt the language of the left and absorb the demands that don't threaten the system. The recent controversies surrounding Hassan Piker and his role in the Democratic Party is a perfect example of this. They have shown more resistance towards his platform than they have for the illegal war that the Trump administration has entered in Iran, because they would rather have someone like Trump in power than actual leftists, because their donors pay them to support things like war and corporate welfare. But this sounds crazy to most people because they think that liberals are leftists. This conflation also warps the entire political spectrum in a way that benefits the right. If liberalism is as far left as the conversation goes, then the actual center of American politics sits somewhere between the center right and the far right. Everything to the left of the Democratic Party becomes unspeakable. You can have a serious conversation about public goods, ending the drug war, dismantling the military industrial complex, reparations, or workers' rights because those ideas have been placed outside of the bounds of acceptable discourse. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and check out my other videos. And if you have the ability and want to contribute, take a look at my Patreon, where you can find a subscription to my books and a bunch of other cool stuff, like the ability to send links in chat and access to closed rooms in our Discord server.